Say that for real, never laugh. He's already used to predicting your future. Oh, Judge, well, that's when you rise, other than that, I'm right. I know, well, for half a second, I was being here, I have that down by. Already, I'll stop. It's finished there. Right? Thank you. How are you? Good, how are you? Good. Rushing. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are joining our Housing Price Task Force. Today is November the 28th, 2023. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairwoman Harris,
Present.
Vice Chairman Espino,
Present.
Councilwoman Gray,
Present.
Councilwoman Peterson,
Present.
Councilor Williams is absent, 4 present, 1 absent, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, City Solicitor, for being here. Chris.
Nick.
Nick. Nick.
Rain.
Rain. Nice to have you here tonight. We also have a policy person. No, you're our chief of staff now. We're gonna need some continuous policy. We have guests here tonight who's gonna help us try to talk about housing. So, Madam Clerk, could you please read the first item into the docket, please?
Item number 1, discussion related to homelessness. The following has been invited: Eric Hirsch, Research Director, Rhode Island Homelessness Action Project; Paula Hodson, Executive Director, Better Lives Rhode Island.
Okay,
You want them both to sit at the table together, it's up to you.
let me call Eric first. Yeah, and I think they're two different organizations, so I would very much.
Just stay in for the record. Just stay in for the record.
Eric Hirsch, Hirsch. And like was mentioned, I'm interim director of the Rhode Island Homeless Advocacy Project, and I'm also professor of sociology at Providence College, and a long time activist, researcher, issues, particularly of homelessness.
Thank you and welcome. Before we get started, I have asked our council vice
Thank you.
to please read our mission statement into the record. And the reason for that is that'll help you sort of help us try to create whatever we're trying to do here. We're glad to have you tonight and we're looking forward to your work, what you're gonna do on some of the things that we can possibly work from as well. But we're gonna start with the mission statement if you don't mind.
I appreciate you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome all. So the mission of the Housing Crisis Task Force, the mission of the Housing Crisis Task Force is to develop and implement policy solutions that address critical need and safe, affordable housing throughout the city. Our goal is to minimize the displacement of existing residents, increase housing security, and promote neighborhood stability.
Thank you so much. So Eric, that is our mission. And I know you remember, maybe about 6 years ago, I had also convinced our councilman to start talking about homelessness. And so you presented at the table for us back then.
Was that long?
That was very long ago. Yeah, very much so.
How does that?
No, it's been a while, but since then, our body of administration and all throughout the inside of Providence know that this is a very serious issue. So for me, it's an exciting time in our life because the city, and as you already know, the state have started to take this on as a issue in the conversation. Don't mean to figure it out. It's just that now we're starting to talk about stuff that's so important, stuff that Doc been talking about for a very long time. So can you give us a little bit background on yourself, your history, how long you've been a part of this?
So I used to live in New York City. I was teaching at Columbia for 8 years, and I got here in 1990. And I've been working on the issue of homelessness in New York City and found that it was a serious problem here as well. So I've been working on the issue here for about 30 years. Unfortunately, I have other interests that I would love to go, work on. But so far, we haven't found even close to a solution to this problem, so I continue to work on this.
Thank you so much.
So I could just give a little background on the problem. And I won't, go into great depth on it, but I'm happy to provide you. I have a kind of a policy paper that I do and try to update every year that talks about homelessness in the state primarily. And I'd be happy to share that with the task force. So anyone want to guess what the average rent was in 1980 in Rhode Island? This is for all kinds of apartments, from efficiency, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms. Anyone want to guess what that was? The monthly rent,
$400.
$161 per month. And I often talk about, I was in grad school in Chicago, which is a pretty high rent city at the time. And I had 3 roommates. We had a 4-bedroom apartment. I was paying $37.50 a month. So it just gives you an idea. Now we're looking at 10 times that. It's a long time ago, but 40 years ago, it's far outpaced what people are able to earn. So that's the most important thing that's going on here. We have a system that is essentially, it's market failure. It's the failure of the housing market to deliver housing that's affordable right now to just about, a majority of households. So the latest rent figures, you probably know some of this. It's $1,996 a month for an available 2-bedroom apartment. So the income needed to afford that at 30% of income is almost exactly $80,000 a year. But the median Rhode Island rental household income, so this is the median income for people who rent in Rhode Island, is $38,339. That's an income gap of $41,500. So that's really the problem. What's happened since the 80s in terms of the escalation of rents. It's gone beyond what most people in the state can afford. So the only really effective solution to this is for the government, federal, state, and local, to intervene in the market and provide affordable housing in whatever form that is. Subsidizing construction, subsidizing operating, subsidizing people's rents, whatever you need to do. Probably all 3 is what is needed. But we've been woefully inadequate at doing that. In fact, the total number of government subsidized. Oh, by the way, guess how we count all low and moderate income housing units in the state? We count them by counting the number of government subsidized units, because the private sector doesn't build any on its own. So it's easy to count low and moderate income housing units by just counting the subsidized ones. We have 37,822. That's 8% of the total of 486,029 housing units. So the number of households who make less than $80,000 a year, remember, that's what you need to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, not to mention single-family homes. That number is 213,000. And so they're chasing 38,000 units. That's 18% of need, so you don't have to use your calculator. So given, the demand ladder and the supply ladder, lots of people fall off into homelessness. And these are people who can't find doubled up situations, or even more likely, they use up their doubled up situation. So if they can't afford an apartment or they get evicted, then they will double up with their friends or family. But a lot of times that doesn't last. And we kind of know about how long it lasts, usually about 2 years. If you still don't have enough money to afford an apartment, that's when you fall up into literal homelessness. And we've never done enough to really deal with this problem. So back in, let me go back to, let's say, 2019. We do something called a point in time count in late January to try to limit the number of people who are outside. Unfortunately, that's not going to work this year because there can be a lot of people outside, unfortunately. Back in 2019, there were 984 people in shelter beds, 71 people unsheltered, for a total of 1,055. That's a snapshot, just one day, one night. At the time, there were probably around 4,000 people who had spent at least one night in the shelter over the course of the previous year. I think that's actually a pretty good estimate of the homeless problem. But the point in time count is the one time we go out and send teams of people out to count people who are out there to try to get an idea of what the actual total is. You can't send teams out every week or every month to try to get an accurate count of the people living outside. It's too difficult. You know, you can really only do it once, maybe twice a year, because it's such a major mobilization to do that count. So then we had COVID. So COVID started. I actually was a person, I was the individual who said, we better do something about the shelters because we can't leave people in really dense shelters, like let's say Harrington Hall, you know, or other very dense shelters, because they're all going to get sick and a large number of them could die, because if you're homeless, you probably have respiratory issues. So I actually suggested that we shut them all down completely. The state didn't want to do that. I put them in touch with people in Connecticut who had done that. Then they decided, oh, well, Connecticut can do it, so I guess we can. But they just reduced the shelter capacity by 50%. And I'll say that the people running the shelter, and I have someone sitting behind me here whose agency runs Harrington Hall, did a really tremendous job, underreported story of making sure that people didn't get sick, and we didn't have a large outbreak. But that pushed people outside. The economic impact of COVID meant that even fewer people could afford these unbelievably expensive apartments. That pushed more people outside. So we had an explosion of people living outside. This is unprecedented in the history of the state. Maybe during the Depression it was true, I'm not sure. I don't, you know, I wasn't around, not quite that old. But since I've been here, and I've been here since homelessness really became an important problem, we never had that many people outside, and the number went up over 500 people. So that definitely got my attention. I'll just say, me personally, this is my own feeling. I found that completely unacceptable, that we allowed 500 people to be living outside. If people get flooded out during a hurricane, or there's a blizzard and, you know, there's a fire, a big fire, and people are displaced, we run to find them shelter. But somehow, if people are quote unquote homeless, we don't do that. There's no sense of urgency. I would say there's still not enough of a sense of urgency. Although I agree with the chair that we're finally starting to focus on this now, which I appreciate. But it's too little too late, in my opinion, because this has been a problem since 2021. 2020, we had 108 people unsheltered. 2020 that was. 2021, 181. 2022, 248, 2023, which is the most recent number we have, 334 at the end of January. And right now, the number is 402. That's the best estimate we have. It's by counting the number of people who have spent at least one night in a place not meant for human habitation over the past 2 weeks. We use that as an estimate because it almost exactly mirrored that 334 in 2023. So it's the best estimate we have. It might be more, it might be a little less, but in any case, we have hundreds of people living outside. And we were just talking, Paula and I were just talking 2 years ago, we had the first protest about this. And we put 20+ tents out on the State House lawn. We didn't put people in them, we were still dealing with COVID. But that was designed to try to get the state to take this more seriously. They didn't. I'll just be honest, I hired someone who I feel was just not qualified to be the housing secretary. And there were, we don't need to go into it, but there were definitely a lot of problems with how he dealt with the problem. The Armory being the class, I'll just say briefly. He didn't believe the numbers. He said, there aren't that many people out there. I'm not sure why he thought that. I asked him, well, what's your source? What's your evidence? He didn't have any. It was just a personal opinion, I guess. He said, well, we're going to set up a warming center for 50 people in the Armory. And I said, you're going to have hundreds of people trying to get in there. Within 3 weeks, 500 different people used the Armory. They had 200 every night. And just thanks to Eileen Hayes, nobody wanted to take that on. Totally understandable, given that it was set up as a warming center for 50 people. So we have to thank Eileen for making it work, even though it wasn't an acceptable place for people to visit. So I think the current housing secretary, he went on outreach, he participated in the point in time count. There was no media there. I didn't even know about it. A lot of people didn't know he was even doing it. He listened to people who were living outside. He cares about the issue. And he's spending a lot of hours trying to fix this. So he's come up with 350 beds that are supposed to open in the next month. All over the state, including here in Providence, Manual House, Charles Gate, and we're certainly hoping for rapidly deployable shelters, pallet shelters here in Providence. The housing secretary's office told me they've already been ordered, so I hope that's actually true. The problem is, it's 20-some degrees out there right now, and we still have hundreds of people outside. So that's the problem. I tell people at Rhode Island Homeless Advocacy Project, here's this great news, and the only question every single one of them asked me was, when are these beds open? So that's the problem we have. Secretary Pryor also says that there's another 200 beds in the pipeline. If we had 500 beds, I know the Coalition to End Homelessness has been saying we need 700. This is my own personal opinion. I think 500 would do the job. But we need them open right now. We need them open today. And I just can't seem to get people to have this sense of urgency. Everyone just goes about their jobs and doing their thing and going to political events. And I just think if it people were being flooded out or burned out, we would have solved the problem immediately. It's not like the 60,000 people who are on the street in Los Angeles. It's just 400 people. There's absolutely no way these people should still be out there. So whatever you can do, I know you have limited power, you know, and the housing secretary has limited power. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of not in my backyard stuff. And pretty much every locality, every town, every city says, we really care about homelessness. This is such an important issue, but there's always a but. This is the wrong place for it. And if everyone says, I care, but this is the wrong place, then there's no place. And I think the housing secretary has done a good job of finding locations. And that's one of the reasons why this is so late, that it's taken so long to get people to agree. And of course, there's also the issue of staffing all of these shelter beds. I mean, we have 2 executive directors right here, and their agencies are incredibly overwhelmed. I mean, think about it. How many people are out there now compared to people who, the much lower numbers before? Naturally, all the existing agencies are overwhelmed, and they're getting blamed. Well, take a look at the numbers, understand what happened. People don't tend to do that, and there's a lot of blame game going on, unfortunately. Really, what needs to happen is all of us, everybody, all the neighbors too, need to be pulling together and saying, let's solve this problem together. That's what needs to happen. So thank you for listening.
Councilwoman Peterson.
Actually, I think you might have answered my question already, but I was trying to figure out if there was a reason behind how long it's taken to open these up. You were mentioning staffing and all those other things, but is there anything else? Because I agree with you. Here we are coming into December and it's freezing outside, and there's people, we both know because I met you officially at an encampment, that there are people still having to go through this. So I'm just wondering if there was any sort of reason behind what we're waiting for outside of staffing and the search, which seems to have, for the beds, it seems to like we're there. What else is holding this right up?
Yeah, it's extremely frustrating because we've been really concerned about not having enough money. That's been all along, and then of course we had the COVID money. The American Rescue Plan, other. So we were all feeling like, wow, this is great. This is really gonna help. And it's not just the shelter beds too. I mean, that the idea is to get people very quickly into permanent housing. I mean, we've got this whole system built, based on the idea of housing first. And the idea of housing first is you put people into housing right away. You have an outreach worker who goes out on the street, there's somebody on the street, you put them in an apartment. That's the best way to do this. And it's probably, I understand the construction costs, but beyond construction costs, it's the most cost-effective way of doing things too. Because people don't wind up in ERs, or they don't wind up exposed to the weather and have to go to the ER or the hospital. Or ultimately a nursing home. A lot of people wind up in nursing homes. Yeah, so it's been the not in my backyard issues. To the extent that I think the housing secretary doesn't, I have a list of the shelters that are opening, but he told me, well, don't put that out in print, Let's not distribute that, because then you have this mobilization at all the places where these shelters are going to be. But I would say the not in my backyard issue, and then the staffing issue. If you're trying to open 350 shelter beds, you have to staff each one of those locations. So that's not easy to do. And I know one of the big problems is hiring people. Can you hire people? It's difficult to do, particularly, I think, until recently at least. What you could pay people was not enough to attract them from other job possibilities. So I would say those are the 2 major barriers.
I'll call myself. Eric, I've sort of been back and forth. I had to raise 4 kids as a single parent. Most important thing was to make sure that they have a roof over their heads for me, and then education. One of the things back in the earlier part of housing struggles, the Fair Housing Act. Back in the days, I'm going back into the 80s, there were opportunities that Congress allowed, you know, where you could, the subsidized was definitely subsidized. They would pay for your rent, they would do all of these things. Now we seem to be up against mostly vouchers. I mean, everything is cut. And the thing that I remember the most out of some of the cuts and where it ended up was, all right, funding were going into historical districts, historical housing.
Right.
That's all well and good, but it was also helping contribute to where we are right now. Cause like myself and many other people, we did depend on subsidized to have housing.
Right,
And a lot of landlords did rent to people in subsidized housing, you know, with that subsidy.
yes,
I was even able to buy into a co-op with subsidized
right,
housing, you know, and that's how you know, at one point the level was. All of a sudden, there was a cut, you know, of housing, you know, the things that they were providing in the housing system. And it just seemed like that also added to the problem, because not everybody can get a voucher.
so I'm glad you brought that up, so. It's definitely a problem that we don't have enough vouchers, but I would also say it's a problem, the voucher system itself. Because the people who get the vouchers can't find a landlord to accept the voucher. You know, let's go back, since you want to go back, let's go back to the 80s. It was Ronald Reagan who came in and
That's
gutted the public housing system.
Yes, it did.
And then he said, well, the market is the way we solve all our problems. So let's just have subsidies and people can walk around and find a landlord, and the private market will solve the problem. Well, that's depending on what caused the problem to begin with to solve the problem. And right now, the landlords, they don't want the inspection, they don't want the paperwork, they don't want any restrictions on raising rents. And so why would they take it?
Right.
They don't take it, except sometimes apartments that are in unbelievably bad condition, so bad that they can't rent it to someone in the private market. You know, of course, then they have an inspection that could probably give them a problem too, but the voucher system isn't working. So what we really need are project-based subsidies, so that we have a building, whether it's rehab or new construction, built by the state, you know, or city, and then you build the subsidies into that. And then let's say someone gets a subsidized apartment and they get a decent job and go onto the private market, they leave, but the subsidy is still there. I mean, we had these two, you know, Section 8, you know, in the buildings, project-based Section 8. A lot of those, you know, it only lasted for 30 years. Some of those have been renewed, fortunately. I have to give Rhode Island Housing credit for making sure that that happens. But we need more of that. That's what we need, because we have to have units to put people in. You know, particularly permanent supportive housing for people who need wraparound services, and deeply subsidized housing, often for families or people who don't need, individuals who don't need the wraparound services. And I just don't think giving people vouchers is going to work. It's not working now. People go around for a month or so, then they get an extension, they go around for another month. They wind up turning the voucher back in, going to the end of the line again. I mean, what kind of system is that? And it's based on the idea that the market solves all our problems. Well, no. This is market failure. That's what we're looking at here. If a majority of households can't afford a 2-bedroom apartment, isn't that failure? Isn't that the right word for it? Yeah. No, that's what's the problem, that's the underlying problem.
Well, I also want to share that I spent all my life in South Providence. And I remember when people had homes in supported housing or whatever. I also turn around and I look again in South Providence. South Providence doesn't look like the way it used to look, which means that people been pushed out of their homes. They've been displaced for many, many, many reasons. Could have been a fire, but you just couldn't fix something, and that was it. A lot of people have been pushed out of their place. So a lot of that, like you said, the market, depending on the market for things, have also gave the leverage to landlords that they don't have to rent to us. They're gonna rent to out-of-staters. They're gonna rent for people who are coming in, who can afford it. When they build it, who's gonna be able to afford it?
Right. And my students,
Let's talk about the Fame Tower for an example.
and students too.
And the tower that was gonna be built.
Yeah.
Of course, the people gonna be able to afford it that lived in it, but what, again, it goes back to what you're saying. What happens to the people who were in those houses that got displaced from those houses? In fact, I spent a lot of time, seeing people and watching people who live there in South Providence, who don't have a house that is homeless, what you're saying, standing around the house that they used to own that no longer they can own because the perks were given to the people who came in to buy it, not the people who are living there. So there's a lot of things that we need to talk about if we're gonna talk about it. We got to talk about historical racism. We got to talk about a lot of things. If we're gonna talk about exactly what's happening with people that are struggling right now, we gotta call it out. We gotta tell it what it is. The poor people can't afford it because they're poor. Poverty. Poverty is a big problem. So, you know, that's where we'll start. So besides all of that, we already know you and I are on the same page with that. But we need to try to figure out now, if this opportunity we have, how do we start to really show the significance of housing, how important housing is, because that's been an outdated market way before you came here from New York. It's been outdated way before you. And so how do we start to really push on the energy and the time we have now, but not in all concentrated areas? Like you said, let's spread things out. Let's allow other neighbors to have the opportunity to help somebody get on their feet, because people do help each other. Believe it or not, there's still people on this earth that really do care about each other. And if people all congregate together, of course, you're gonna keep poverty concentrated. You're gonna keep it where people can't get on their feet, where they can't move from there. Because my real thing is not so much as the housing, it's that soul of that person that's in that house, and how are they gonna be able to sustain and continue to sustain? Because there's a lot of other issues that come with that. People have told me, and I ask people, like, why are you here? You know, why are you here? Why are you drinking? Well, of course, if you don't have a home or anything, you know, those are other things that come along, those other mental illness and other things that come along. You mentioned, and I'm not gonna go on and on, because I can ramp on and on. I can go on and on. I've been angry about this for years. Just like I was angry about a lot of other things, I've been angry about people not having a roof over their head. That's not a good feeling.
I remember.
But it's not a good feeling. I know how you feel. I know how passionate you are. But you've got some things you learned over the years. There's something that you have. You do have some kind of solution. You have thought about it, and you have thought, if I can get people to sing the same exact song and a good note that they're able to sing, I'm gonna be able to put this note out and it's gonna be a bestseller. What have you been thinking about over the years, other than the big picture that we see in front of us, which is overwhelming? And that now that you sort of got some people ears, you know what I mean? What it is that we can do.
So I really do think firmly supportive housing is the most important thing.
Mhm.
And anything the council could do to facilitate in the short term, shelter beds, you know, potentially you can have buildings that could be used as shelter and then turned into permanent housing after that. That would be the thing to look for. So concretely, identify buildings in your wards and let Stephen Pryor know where these buildings are. That's the kind of thing that really can make a difference. So the building can be rehabbed. There's a lot of money out there. And I think he's willing to commit that money for that kind of project. In the short-term shelter beds, and then very quickly turn that into permanent supportive housing. You know, so, and that requires services, definitely. And that's one of the things that helps neighbors feel comfortable with having people who are formerly homeless in their neighborhood. The fact that they're going to be supportive services and that there'll be case managers there in case there are any issues, you know, that arise due to people living there. So I think that's the most important thing. And like I said earlier, and then there's people who might not need intensive services, but need big subsidies in order to live in the park. I mean, look at someone who's on SSI, right? So they're making $800 to $900 a month. That's supposed to pay for everything. They don't automatically get housing. They might get food stamps. They're probably on Medicaid, but that's not going to pay the rent. They can't use their whole check. Even if they did use their whole check, that can't pay the rent. So those people are looking at maybe $200 to $250 a month that they can afford, and they're happy to pay that. But just think about the kind of subsidies that are necessary to make that viable over the long run. And most of these people are disabled and can't work full time. Just about everybody wants to work full time. And a lot of these disabled people who I talk to think they're going to work full time, and I know they're not. I mean, they're not, but they want to. It's the opposite of what people think. You know, they're not going to work full time, so they're never going to be able to get a market rate apartment. And so they're going to be on the street or in the shelter unless we help them. So to me, that's the key thing. And I feel like the housing secretary Pryor, that he understands this and is trying to do what he can to make this happen. The only thing is, a lot of times you propose permanent supportive housing or deeply subsidized housing. And then by the time you get to the end of the project, oh, it kind of went away because, oh, we just couldn't afford to provide the subsidies. So that's something the council could do, is to really try to track this and make sure that what's proposed is what winds up happening at the end. And that you don't just have workforce housing or middle class housing or luxury housing at the end. Something that would, you know, make for higher profits for developers. So that would be the big thing, I would say. I just want to say, next Sunday at Madison Street Church right down the road at 7 o'clock, we do have a breakfast, and then we're going to give out sleeping bags and warm clothes and tents and whatever people need, because there's still going to be people on the street. Unfortunately, we're not opening all of these beds right away. And so our thought is that you know, elected officials like yourselves or chiefs of staff or could come and talk to people. We're not having any press. We're not doing a protest. Okay, you have my word on that. We're not going to give people a hard time. We might do that down the road, you never know. But we're not doing it at this event. The idea is for people to talk to the people who are living outside or in shelters, and some of the time outside. So I'm inviting all of you to come to that. It's early, so hopefully some of you are early birds. So the breakfast starts at 7. I'm not an early bird. I'll be there.
A lot of people are coming, and Crossroads is doing the building now. They're building in the area. And a lot of times, and I know this happens a lot, when people hear of such buildings, of such opportunity for them to have a place to live, they come from other places. How do you guys deal with that? How do you deal with people who hear of a better life on the other side of the greener grass on the other side? So they come from Oklahoma, they come from Houston, Texas, they come from whatever. Do you help them get home or is there?
I mean, for example, travelers aid do for.
Yeah,
crossroads.
that's
But,
why.
I mean, the overwhelming majority of people who are living outside are in the shelter and who we give any kind of housing to are from
From Broward.
the idea.
Go down.
The idea that the majority of people are from somewhere else is just not true.
I've met
Last time we asked about.
I've met people.
I'm sure you've met them.
Yeah, I talk to people, especially on the street.
I'm sure you've met them, but I'm talking about the numbers,
Oh, the
so.
numbers.
Well, last time we were asking city or town of West Point residents, about 60% of people were actually from Providence,
Mm.
statewide in the whole system. So the idea that there are all these people from elsewhere doesn't hold up. I could send you the most recent numbers on it.
Mhm. But there are just not that many. Yes.
Exactly,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
yeah. Yeah. Is anybody else, I don't wanna. Cause Eric and I will go back and forth this all day, we grab a coffee for the rest of it. Yeah, anybody else? Cause
I like to ask
Please,
Mr.
Council.
Eric, thank
Yeah.
you so much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
And I don't mean to add to the frustration that we had here, because it is extremely frustrating. Because you mentioned that we have on the street today, what is it, like 402 people?
So it's the latest.
402. And we have millions of dollars
Yes,
out there designated to take care of this issue. And it has not happened. You know, steps are being taken, but steps have been taken for the last 3 or 4 years. Since I've been on the council 4 years ago with,
no,
there's been money out there and people will come in, they'll talk about this is what they're doing, we're doing this, we're doing that. And millions of dollars allocated to this, and today we still have the same number of people on the street.
yeah.
You know, back in 2019, you said it was about just over 100 people on the streets. Today's 402, so it grows like by 50%. Do we have any data to show whether, how many people that were homeless in 2019 are still homeless today? Or is just new people that are out there?
That's a great question.
I'll be
It's-
interested to
we
know
we
that.
do have that number, I don't have that number yet at the moment, but. There's a lot of new people. If you're just looking at people who go through the shelter system, for example. The large majority of people just stay a brief period of time. But then there are some people, places like Harrington Hall, there are people who might have been there for years. So there's a small group of people who are chronically homeless and have been in that situation for a long time. And really what we're trying to do is to eliminate that group. I mean, nobody should be living in a homeless shelter. I mean, they're called emergency shelters for a reason. They're only for emergencies. But because we don't have enough units to put people in, we have a situation where people wind up living in the shelter system. It's totally unacceptable. And now we I'll say it, this is what, back in 2020, I was hoping would not happen. We've now institutionalized people living outside too. And so when the Charles Street encampment was cleared, there were some people who had lived there for 5 or 6 years. That's completely unacceptable. And they're not living there voluntarily, Any one of them would have taken an apartment if we offered it to them.
Well, and you said something earlier that's interesting, that not in my backyard.
Yes.
Which is really having a negative impact on this. But I do think that if you concentrate on trying to find 200 beds in one particular community, you might have that issue. This is where you're gonna be confronted with.
Yes,
But just thinking logically, if you have 402 people on the street right now, we have 39 cities and towns. If you divide that number, you come up to about 10 people per community. And with the money we have as a state, it'll be easy to find a unit or two per community
yeah,
to house these people. if you're trying to find 200 apartments in Providence, on Pawtucket, on Santa Claus,
So,
that's where it becomes a real problem.
so the governor, I often have been at odds with the governor. I've done multiple protests with my colleagues against some of the things he's done. But I will say that he was at a meeting of the League of Cities and Towns, and he said to all the people assembled, well, you're all complaining, you know, tell me, give me some buildings. So I really appreciated that he said that. And a lot of these new shelter beds are in places like Burrillville, Cumberland, East Providence and Pawtucket Line, South Kingstown, Woonsocket, you know, Westerly. So they are all over the state. So they're looking all over the state to try to find beds, and anything that's offered to them, they do everything they can to make sure they can use that building or that facility.
But if you minimize the capacity for a community, you might be more susceptible. You know, if you come to Providence and you say, all we need is 50 beds, sure, that could be arranged.
Well, that's about what I think you're planning to open in terms of Echo Village.
Right, but there's other units already here, like you have Crossroads, which is here, and in the house, there's other shelters here already.
So, yeah, my thing is,
You know, I'm
Let's-
for this, but I was just saying, okay, if we have 402, we divide that into all the community, it's 10 per community, give me 10, I'll go to my one. Everybody's.
yeah, if you can make that happen, let's go for it, but I doubt if you can, that's just the reality. I mean, I think,
Well, that's where I said it's a shared sacrifice, where everybody needs to chip in. It's not gonna be going around and around.
I totally agree with you.
I mean, we could put an end to this tomorrow, if the community says, I'll take 15 people, give me the resources. You have no one on the street.
I mean, Pryor did, you know, because people were complaining about, oh, well, the transportation problems or, you know, different things that they were complaining about, and he passed a bill that devoted funds to help people with those concerns in these different towns and cities. So, I mean, my argument is everyone needs to say, let's solve this problem together.
Correct.
But that means no one should be saying, well, let this other town, let this other city do it. We all have to do everything we can. Because it's urgent.
And
These people can die out there. You know, particularly someone, let's say someone is using drugs. And they're using drugs because they're homeless. And maybe they didn't even use drugs much before they became homeless.
I don't think that any form of government can consider itself being successful if people die on the street.
Yes.
Because they don't have a home to live in.
Absolutely.
But
It's a
like,
complete failure.
you're vulnerable to overdoses and you're vulnerable to passing out and then freezing to death. That's the problem we're dealing with on a night like this. But the sense of urgency just isn't there. Unless you're talking to people who are out there, you know, and I talk to them all the time. So that's what creates the sense of urgency that I have. That's why I'm inviting people on Sunday to come and talk with people. Some of them are very powerful speakers about their situation. And they're still honest about the individual problems they might have. But you hear about the suffering, and then you feel like, well, why are we allowing this to happen? We shouldn't.
That's why when you said, I won't call it something that made a lot of sense. You said to me, like, anybody that works for a living is one paycheck away from being homeless. There's a minute you lose that job, what are you gonna do?
No.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's all. You also said, okay, thank you. You also said that one of the shelters is the Emmanuel House.
Yeah,
When did they take the shelter away from the Emmanuel House? I know they took the recovering program away, which I got angry about. Because, Occupy Providence, what was downtown,
Yes.
at one time. We started in New York, I was up in New York protesting around houses about housing, the banks, protesting in the rain about the banks, taking housing, people going in foreclosure. And Occupy came from nowhere. And they were actually students who had a loan, student loan, bigger than any mortgage you can speak of, right? So these young people took the streets and it was like powerful. Then it sort of moved here to Providence, you know, folks started organizing themselves and they started basically pushing, and you may have been a part of that, for housing. And I do know that, Mayor Tavares moved folks from here, from the Burnside Park to Emmanuel House. Now, look, I had no problem with Emmanuel House. Emmanuel House actually had a recovery center in it, the Providence Center. So the people would go there in 3 days and they would leave out of there, you wouldn't even recognize the person, right? Now you can work with that person in their right mind, you know, they're feeling some kind of different energy. And I actually was angry when they took the funding away, because that was the only resource that I felt that
So,
people had direct, could be from the street directly there to
So-
recover.
what happened there was that there was a mediation because Occupy said we want to help people who are homeless. So I actually was chosen as the person to be in the mediation session with a parent. So it was the two of us and the judge. And that's what we wound up coming up with, which was the day program at Emmanuel House. And I'll say that my idea was that it would continue, but the diocese didn't pick up the funding, didn't apply for additional funding. That's what happened. So they decided not to continue the program, even though they had kind of promised me that they would.
Oh, too bad, because I thought it was a good program.
So it's still open as a shelter, and they just opened another 40 beds on the second floor to deal with this problem. That's now open.
But they don't have the recovery center.
No.
That's an example witness. Wow, the overwhelming of these problems in neighborhoods, but not with the rest of the resources that go with it. That would be very helpful.
No.
I mean, it was at one time. Councilwoman Grace.
Just going out off of what you said about the, not in my backyard and spreading it out all throughout the state. I think some of the problem is the way we word things and the way we talk to people. You may not have an adversary unless you go in there with an adversary, mind. That not in my backyard might be community concerns. You know, we need to word ourselves, be mindful of how we word things. Because I might listen to you more if you came and you said, oh, well, I understand you have concerns. Let's see what we can do to talk about that. Oh, you people, you know, so now you got two adversaries, and that's what happens at a lot of those things, is people come in and everybody's already have a mindset because they felt like they've been attacked, you know. I really and truly believe what you say is true. If, and you two, Chair, they need to spread it out a little bit more, and not just in our city, and not just in Woonsocket, or some of the people, the places on your list are still the ones that always get dumped on, you know? So it's basically, it's not a providence, you know, but it's the poor ones, you know, and we gotta get out of the habit of thinking that the people that are struggling on their own little terms have to get that added stress put on their community. If we don't start spreading it out and putting it to other places, you're gonna always have this little. There's gonna always be some type of, people that are gonna be upset. That you're going in there because they're saying to themselves, I can barely pay my rent. I'm teetering. And you're gonna put 200 more people in my community, which is, people already talk about my community. My community is already, not doing that well. Now, the services are not gonna be the way they were. Now, there's gonna be more police activity. Now, the landlord is gonna say, well, I'm not going over there, you send me the rent and not come and care about what's going on in my home. So we need to work together. We have to work together and come up with different solutions and different ways of going at something. I think that you guys are right, we need to put it in different areas and not just the poorest neighborhoods in any city. We also need to take that millions of dollars and say, hey, I have $1 million for you right now. If you can put 10 houses, 10 people right here in this area, and they don't have to be together. We're gonna separate them. So that it's not in this one community. It's not gonna be just on the east side, which we know it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna just be in South Providence. It's not just gonna be on Smith Hill. It's gonna be spread out, and we have the funds to help do this. My only other problem is you and I both know that the housing stock is not what it used to be, because we allowed in the 80s, going back to those lovely 80s.
Right.
We allowed for them to come in and say, oh, well, we're too densely populated and we need to break up of this, that, and the other, and build big, beautiful homes in place of family homes, We allowed that to happen. I'm one of the ones that sat there and watched it happen, and I was like, oh, okay, this sounds good. We're gonna take you out of the projects because you don't want to be in the projects. You want to be in scattered housing. Scattered housing was a project, but it was individual homes. But people didn't. And then when people got out there, they could not survive because they were used to being in a certain place, having a certain rent. Scattered housing, their rent went up, utilities were not included, all these things happened. So we have to also educate the masses, the people that we're talking about homeless, we have to educate them. But we need to educate the people that are the landlords. We need to educate everybody on what is going on. I am a strong believer that there is not a house in Providence worth $1,300 worth of rent. I don't believe, I haven't seen one. You can point me to one, not renting, If I own something and I'm paying a mortgage, maybe, but I should not be, nobody should be paying that type of money for it. Nobody. I don't care how big this, give me 5 bedrooms, I still don't think I should be paying that type of money for rent, So I am with you. I think we need to try to figure out a way to go about doing that, to establishing something like that. I think that's where we can do. That was the best idea I've heard in a long time. We talked about it, but nobody ever really laid it out. And I really think that that's where we can come in and say, look, we're not trying to dump our 400 people in your community, but they are Rhode Islanders, just like you're Rhode Island. We need to spread this out throughout this state. The other thing that was interesting, you said there's 400 homeless. I would probably say there's probably 800 that are almost on that edge because the rents have gotten so high now that they may be the next ones that's gonna be doubling up or sleeping on somebody's couch, So
Yeah, the 400 people outside.
that's what I'm talking about.
The total was, the last time we counted, was about 1,800. because there's, maybe 1,100, 1,200 people.
Yeah, that's, see that, yeah.
In shelters.
Now, I'm not even talking shelters, I'm talking people that are working it every day, and some of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And really, because every single day that I'm sitting over at that annex, people are coming into that office saying, I need a place to stay, my rents went sky high, and these are not the same people, these are different people all the time. And they come from all backgrounds, all nationalities, all income, because a lot of them are working. They're working hard, but the rents just keep going higher and higher and higher. And every time they think they're getting a little bit of a raise, the rent goes even higher. So I think we need to start. We can't just focus on homeless. We gotta focus on the homeless, the soon to be homeless, and everything else. And I think some of the things are gonna be a lot easier, but I think getting 400 people off the street should be probably one of the easiest things that we can do. And I don't know why we can't do it. Because if we just take that mentality and say, look, here's your $1 million, 2 million, put them people in a house in your city.
So I think that the state housing department has taken exactly the approach that you're suggesting in terms of trying to address people's concerns, trying to throw some money at them in order to address some of those concerns. But some of the concerns are based on assumptions about who's going to be moving in. And that includes the color of people's skin, that includes what language people are speaking. So they are finding rationalizations for what the real issue is, which is stereotypical notions about who's going to be moving in and what they're going to be doing. So that's the problem, is that you can address the concerns. And who's nicer than Stephen Pryor? He's just a very polite guy. Maybe too much so on some occasions. So, he's tried everything he can do to get all of the towns and cities to come up with ideas, and even the governor, who I would expect maybe to be siding with the towns and cities. He even said, give me some buildings. And he does have some sway with the mayors for sure.
But when you say give me some buildings, I think they're talking, our mindset goes to, how many people are we talking about? We need to let them know, we're not talking hundreds,
Right.
we're not talking 50, we need to make sure that this is.
So South Kingstown, they're gonna open 12 beds. So it's exactly what you're suggesting. I mean, up in Burrville, they have 10 families in the Zamorano. So that's the model that he's trying to follow, absolutely. He's not trying to, anything you give him, he's gonna open. That's my impression of what he's been doing. So they're already trying it. It's not like, oh, let's just put everything in Providence. I don't think that's the idea. That's not what they want
I
to
don't
do.
think he's saying that, because if the message was out there that we're looking for 10 beds in each community, they probably may have gotten it already. We're looking for 10 beds in each community, and we have a $1 million, $100,000 per person, which is gonna carry them for at least a couple of years. But when you
I'm
consider,
not sure
no,
that
but I'm
they
talking about when you
put it back.
consider the expenses and the housing expenses that person is going to incur in that community. Put $1 million attached to 10 people, that's $100,000 per person. And that $100,000, if it's well managed by the state itself, could carry that person for 3 or 4 years with housing and certain needs. But that could become a permanent solution. So I wonder if we're.
$1 million per person that wouldn't be viable. That would be $400,000.
Not per person, I said 100,000, which.
Oh,
would be-
100,000.
Yeah,
For 7 years.
I said $1 million per group of 10,
Oh,
so
okay.
100,000.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Right. As you said, in North Kingston, they're gonna open up what, South Kingston,
South
10 beds, 12 beds,
10 to 12 beds.
right, which is the numbers I working up with, so let's market that, let's put it up there. Other communities will probably say, sure, put it on.
I'll bring it up and see what he says.
Well, and we really appreciate you and your work in pushing the way you're pushing.
Thank you.
Simply because I think, you've given Stephen Pryor, you know how Muhammad Ali used to always get ready. Rub him up, like, I'm free, you know, and all that stuff. That's what you're doing. And, this is all brand new. I have to keep reminding us of that. Before the pandemic program, I don't think people were thinking the crisis, the urgency, or seeing people the way you guys have been working and seeing people. I don't think everybody's seen that.
Right,
Everybody went home, had to work from home. And all of a sudden, things started to look different for them because they weren't leaving the city, you know, to work or whatever. It was actually home, and they started to see things that they didn't see before. So I think there's a little bit more, I'm believing that. Maybe that's just me, but I'm believing people have a little bit more consciousness. And now we're at the stage where, like you say, Stephen Pryor, where he got the message, he's out there. Just keep cheering him on. Because repetition is definitely something we have to keep repeating when people just don't want to hear. We raise kids that way. We do that with people that don't want to hear us, and just keep saying the same thing over and over. Eventually they'll hear it. So we appreciate the work you're doing.
thank you.
And thank you, Sue, for presenting tonight before us. And we're always here. If you think of, you know, okay, I've been out there and we think that the city can help move this or that, that's what we're here for. And we're really committed to this. I'm really proud of the people that's on this committee because they do think very hard. We have Chris, who once I thought personality for staff, but she has been around and she's a good guide. She guides us in ways that we are trying to do our best. You know, I don't have the answer. I would love to have the answer. I'm waiting for that magic person to be at that other end and everybody will go bingo, then we get it. I know it's gonna happen sooner or later, but we don't know when. But in the meantime, yeah, just keep pushing the way you're pushing, because it's good to hear that folks are beginning to hear a little bit, but they have to keep hearing it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for presenting tonight.
Thank you.
I also want to acknowledge, we have Emily Freeman in the room. We have Karen Singleton from Crossroads joining us tonight. House of Hope, Kate? Sarah, I don't know, do I always call you Kate? Sarah. House of Hope, yeah, so Madam Clerk, could you please read the next item? Follow up with us.
So Paula Hudson, Executive Director of Better Life Rhode Island.
Welcome, Paula, please join us.
Thank you.
So thank you, Paula. You may present your name to the first, please.
Just take me to the right.
Paula Hudson, Executive Director, Better Lives Rhode Island.
Again, thank you for joining us tonight. We have been talking to as many people as possible. Your work, what you do on the ground, what you do out there becomes the lens for us to be able to look clearly into what we need to be doing or trying to, right? As you can see, it's all an effort. Tell us a little about yourself, your organization, and
So Better Lives Rhode Island was formerly Providence in Town Churches Association. The agency will celebrate its 50th birthday in 2024. We started as a very small food pantry. We now operate in Providence. We serve all the residents of Providence from our food pantry. We feed about 3,000 to 3,500 a month in our food pantry. We operate a weekly meal site at Matheson Street Church. We feed 500 to 600 people a month there. And we have a homeless outreach. I have 5 social workers who do homeless outreach, and we work strictly with the homeless. Last year, we were able to house 53 people who are still housed. We do, permanent supportive housing. We do wraparound services. We don't have housing ourselves. We work with landlords, we work with, vouchers, we work with the system to get our clients. And we serve about 120 to 130 homeless individuals every month. And I have a full staff of 9.
Where you located?
We're located at 12 Abbott Park Place, which is, we rent space, from Beneficent Church.
So what was your success story of being able to keep 53 people housed, and were they homeless first?
Oh, yeah, we only work with homeless people.
Can you share with us what your success story in, and that's very important, sustainability, and for people to be able to be.
So we have relationships with some private landlords and who will take vouchers, who will, take Section 8. And they will rent to our clients because they know that if there's an issue, they can call us. They don't have to deal with the issues themselves. So I have a housing stabilization social worker, and she visits everybody who's housed at least once a month to ensure that rents are being paid, the apartments being looked after, to make sure they're not having any issues, that they understand what their responsibilities are, and so a number of our clients are elderly, are seniors, and so we're able to get them into senior housing.
How you find it?
We look. How do we find it?
How you fund it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said, how do I find it? Sorry.
Oh, I know you're busy. I mean, I'm gonna get to that, because there's a lot of good stuff happening here. This stuff like really good for me.
So we're funded mainly through the state. Our homeless outreach is funded entirely by the state. Our food pantry, the city gives us some money, but the bulk, we raise money for the food pantry. We don't have a direct line of subsidization for our food pantry. So I've got to fundraise, I've got to raise money, write grants. And the same with our meal site. We have no direct funding for the meal site, so I write grants every year, try and cover the expenses.
And you only have 9 staff people?
Yeah, that includes me.
And are those 9, are they a part of the outreach as well?
I have 6 are part of the outreach. I work with the outreach. I have an operations manager who does a lot of the grant writing with me, and the financials, she looks after the financials, and myself, and then a food pantry coordinator. And the rest is done by volunteers. So I have about 20 volunteers who help us with the programs.
How do you volunteer? How do you get involved and volunteer?
You just apply, you can go to our website and make an application. A lot of them have been long time volunteers. Our meal site actually has been run by the same woman since 1988, and she's still there. She's a nurse practitioner, and she still coordinates everything for our meal site. And the meal site's entirely volunteer. There's no staff, except our outreach staff go there every Friday afternoon to talk with the people and see who might need some help and assistance. And
Do you have you been involved a lot with the encampments?
yes,
And that's,
we're about the only ones that go out there,
okay.
aside from hospital. Yep. We're very much involved in that.
So, in your agency, you also have wraparound service, I'm assuming.
Yes,
You work with Kodak or Providence?
no, we provide the services. We refer out if when somebody comes to us for case management, we offer very intensive holistic case management. So we don't just say, oh, you're homeless, fill out an application. You know, we ask, we get all their information, you know? Do you have health care? Do you have a primary physician? Do you have mental health aid? You know, are you interested in, do you have substance use? Are you interested in getting help for that? No, not right now. Okay, that's fine. We don't judge. We meet people exactly where they are and they decide their fate. You know, but if they want help, we make sure that they get it.
Yes, hi Paula, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're able to house 53 families or individuals?
Mhm.
In
Both, yeah,
how many years?
1 year.
In 1 year?
Mhm. Last year.
Thanks so much.
Mhm.
And how do they pay their rent? Is that all Section 8 or through?
Various, you know, a number of them are, we got them in subsidized housing. So they just pay 30% of their rent, you know, some of them are HUD housing, some are in, private landlords, but they have, a voucher. Some are able to pay their own rent, you know.
If they have a
Yeah,
job, you know?
yeah. Yeah,
That is wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you. That's just, that's what we need. Thank you. Paula.
And if I may, with all due respect, but your idea of, you know, separating everybody out in various,
Thinking out loud.
yeah, I know, and it's not, you know, it's a good thought, however, I would like to, you know, remind you that these are people that we're talking about, you can't just dole them out like cookies, you know? A lot of people are from Providence, they were born in Providence, they have lived in Providence their whole lives. All their support systems are in Providence. Providence is all they know. I'll guarantee you, they are not going to West Warwick. They are not going to Burrillville. They are not going to Woonsocket. They will stay in a tent.
So if they give you the choice of being cold in the tent, or going to one side in a nice warm apartment with the services that they need,
Mhm,
they say that they would choose to stay in a tent in Providence.
mhm.
And that's what the services should come in, because obviously there is something wrong there when you compare the two. I mean,
No, some-
you can live in Woonsocket and come to Providence and enjoy
Not
your friends.
if you don't have transportation, you know, not if you are.
But if you
going-
get a bus pass, and
Yeah.
that's why I said,
And don't
maybe,
forget, Woonsocket has as many homeless people out there as we have down here, so they're overwhelming with homeless. too.
well, Woonsocket was just.
Yeah,
You know, just
yeah,
that
throw
city
that.
that I put out there.
No, I'm just telling, you know, we interact with these people day in, day out. There are peaks, there are plans. We know that they trust us. And they won't go into shelter and they won't go to another town. Now, not all of them, not all of them. Some of them would. You know, but the vast majority want to stay where they know people, like where they're familiar with, you know? So I'm just saying, you know, that's the reality, when you know, and they all have a story, but they're all people, you know? And they have their own needs and wants and dreams and goals and, you know, that they're individuals, and it's almost insulting to say that you gotta go here or too bad for you, you know? So it's a delicate situation, and it, you know,
Very.
one of the reasons we are facing the numbers that we're facing today is because there's no easy answer. You know, it's complicated, like everything in life, it's complicated. And one of the reasons too, we saw an upshoot in the numbers once the eviction moratorium was taken off. That's when we saw a lot more families. We've got more families now in the shelter queue than ever before. I mean, and that's a real problem. So,
But I mean to, you know, Councilor Graves said something which I think is important. It's all how you deliver the message as well. You're not gonna go in and say, you're gonna go here, you're gonna go there, you're depriving your own personal freedom or depriving you of your liberty.
Mhm.
We're giving you an option to the condition.
Oh,
With the
absolutely.
condition that
We
you.
always give them options, definitely.
With 20, 10 degrees outside, we've got a nice warm house for you here. It may not be what you want in the moment because you wanna, for instance, you wanna be in Providence. But until you're stable enough financially or otherwise socially to be in Providence,
Sure,
this is what we have for you so that you don't die
yeah,
pursuing your dream.
yeah,
You be here, we'll provide you with the services, and then at some point you'll be able to be where you want to be.
Right.
Just to help you.
yeah.
Not that driving that person has to
Yeah.
where you want to be.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's how we treat when we get a shelter bed, when there's a vacancy. And we ask them, we've got a bed for you, and a lot of times they're like, nope, I'm not going there.
So,
I'd rather stay in a tent. So, but we always ask them, it's always their choice, always their choice. It's their lives, so, but yeah, no, I mean, like I said, it's not a bad idea. It's just, it's not the magic bullet that we would like it to be, because it's not gonna work for everybody, even if we could get all the towns together and agree, there's gonna be. But you'd be surprised at, West Warwick has a lot of homes there. Warwick has a lot of homes in Warwick. And I know because we've gone out to encampments there as well, with supplies and, so. Every town has, every town.
Mhm.
I don't care what town it is, every town has either a small or a very large group of homeless people who want to stay in their town because that's what they know. That's a town that they know, that's a town that they grew up in, that's where their community is.
that's true.
How long have these 53 people been in the house? Did you say 1 year?
Yeah,
Okay, so you just started this program?
no, we've been doing it, that's just what we accomplished last year. The year before that, we housed at 42, the year before that, so
So these are not permanent housing or they're,
Oh, yeah.
but just for a certain,
they have a lease,
okay.
yeah.
So I guess my question is, if then it's not 53, it was the year before you had more and the year before that you had more. So this has been an ongoing thing for how long?
Since I took over
Which is?
in 21, and before that, I was a case manager and I housed 43 that year too.
Okay,
So your permanent house.
Yeah,
yeah, that's what
with
I'm
the
saying.
lease,
That's the-
yeah, with the lease, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. But they're becoming scarcer and scarcer, because,
That's my next question. You probably have a waiting list.
yeah. Yeah, but, we have a waiting list even for case management. There's so many people out there, we have to. I don't want the staff to burn out, but, now that we've gotten them the house, and of course rents have gone up again, so people are staying put now. They can't move from the less expensive apartments and move up because it's outside. So the vacancy rates are lower, a lot lower this year.
Mhm.
So I don't anticipate, we're not on track to house that many this year. And I'm talking the fiscal year. Our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th, so.
And you provide I'm sorry.
No, because
I think it's interesting that you said you provide wraparound services for all the 53 or all of whoever you get in.
Yes.
Yeah,
For anyone that we have housed, yes.
okay.
But we just started doing that in the last year and a half, because I didn't have staff before then. I didn't have enough staff, but now I do. And so one staff is dedicated to that work.
one person with 53 people.
Yeah, she's only got to, visit once a month or,
Yeah, she said a monthly,
yeah, once every 6 weeks. For some of them, they're so stable that it's a phone call, you know, and a phone call to the,
Oh,
yeah, you know, to the landlord to say, is everything okay? I haven't heard anything, so I'm assuming, you know, so for a lot of them, it's a phone call will suffice. And for the needy ones, we know who they are. And so we stay on those, you know, the ones who are likely to not be as successful, you know, are having a difficult time transitioning into the whole. Now they've got a house, now they've got rent to pay, now they've got, you know, utilities now. You know,
You said that the majority of them are elderly? Is that what?
no, not the majority, but a number of them are either elderly or disabled. And a lot of the buildings are for elderly or disabled, they have to subsidize, so. We, you know, one part of the case management is, you know, filling out applications for every subsidized potential, you know, housing in whatever town they'll agree to go to, you know. And some of them will go to Warwick, have moved to Warwick, or if we've been able to get them, you know, apartment there. So, but we just, you know, that's part of it, is fill out 20, 30, 40 applications, right? Just keep sending them in. Because a lot of times right out of the blue, they get, you know, we get a call and they just got a unit open, you know? So,
So are you work? Okay, I gotta follow.
Yeah, learn how to.
So you're working primarily with the bigger things like HUD and PHA, or you're working more with the individual landlords?
more with the individual. Well, we leave no stone unturned.
Okay.
You know, so we get them on the centralized waivers, we get them, we fill out applications, all the housing authorities, if they have any openings coming up, you know, so our ears to the ground all the time.
I do have to say that you're probably one of the best ones I've heard so far, and how they're doing their work. You and Household, you got a really good reputation compared to some of the others.
Well, thank you, yeah.
So, having said that.
Yeah.
I gave you some kudos, now,
Yeah.
kudos, now, pick it up. No, so- How you're able to do this, and a lot of the others don't seem to be able to do it. Are you sharing your knowledge or whatever? What are you doing? Because 53 is fabulous. That's
Yeah, it
53 or off,
Yeah.
off. So it's not 456, but there's still 400 out there.
Mhm.
So what are we doing? Or what can you, House of Hope, and all the rest of you guys get together a little bit more? Because sometimes I think you're a little disjointed. Is there a better way for you guys to work better together? And what can you bring to the table if you were working more closely together?
Certainly, you know, our case management style. And we do get referrals from other agencies. You know, they send clients to us, so. You know, yeah, I don't really have an answer for that.
Can I add,
Go ahead.
could it be different levels of services? Where you concentrated in finding permanent housing to some of these families? And where other agency might just concentrate on getting them off the street into a shelter? Is that perhaps the difference? Have you housed someone into a permanent apartment right off the street? In the sense that from a tent?
Oh, yeah, all of them have gone from applicants to shelters, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We just, yeah. When people call us to our house and are at risk of losing their housing, we do give them advice. We refer them to the legal services. You know, we tell them, don't sign anything, like whether you need to talk to an attorney, you know, but. So we do give advice and we, you know, and if it's a question, then we refer them to, Crawford, who has a diversion program, so if it's a question of rent or, you know, they've got an apartment, but they just need person security, you know, then Crawford has that ability to provide them with that, so. Yeah, no, but we take them right from the tent, and we just stick with them. Until we get a house. I mean, one guy we got a house last year, he'd been 4 years.
Oh,
He was one of my first clients when I started with the agency. You know,
is he employed?
yeah,
Oh, well,
yeah, and he's from Providence, he went to Woonsocket, he took an apartment in Woonsocket, yeah, so.
that's great to hear.
Well, it's been a pleasure hearing from you. I've heard, Councilman Royce and Councilwoman Peterson speak of you. I've never met you. It's a pleasure meeting you, and I appreciate all you do in your work.
Of course.
I mean, of course, that work is not easy, you know, Eric made it very clear, these are people's lives, these are people who have been marginalized for
Yes.
years, and now at the opportunity for you guys to put people in the spotlight and say, look, these people do exist, they need a house, they need a roof over their heads, and we're trying to do the best we can in that. So we appreciate that.
Well, and we appreciate you sharing, and if there's anything we can do to help you, please reach
I
out.
was gonna mention that, if there's anything, and that's, this committee is open up for that particular reason. To try to figure out how do we really make an impact, in a way that it is, helpful, not harmful towards your work, but helpful. And to change things compared to what it has been.
Right, yes.
We're in an opportunity, I have to keep saying that until I see no more funding left in the system.
Yeah,
Once it all dies out, I might say, oh boy, we in trouble, but you know, right now,
right.
we still see that opportunity, and collectively, like what the councilman is pointing out, collectively coming together, I think there is an answer, I think there will be an answer.
Well, it's interesting, you spoke.
You guys been doing it by yourself for so long, and you're doing the work, so you're inside.
Yeah, so to infill, you know, that is one way I did work, with another, agency. That had housing, and that's what we would do. We would find an empty lot, you know, and we would like build two, you know, two apartments. And, or we would, we also would work with developers, you know, to, if they, you know, give them density relief, right, if they put in some of the affordable housing. And then we would, actually for those, we had lotteries. And people could win a house, so there's a number of different ways, but I just drive around and I see like a triple decker that's for sale, and I'm like, oh, look, that could be 3 affordable apartments, you know, like. We could buy that for 500,000, you know, it is not a lot, and, you know, we could. Provide the wraparound services, put people in there, you know, work with them to stay in there, you don't have to have millions. You know, you don't have to have millions, so we could do it if the political will is there, and up until this point, frankly, it hasn't been, but it's starting to change now,
It's starting to change.
yeah.
And let's buy a hotel, let's buy the one, we keep putting that money in West Warwick
Right,
every year.
yeah,
That's the one that we really need to buy.
Yeah.
I mean, we actually own it, we just haven't claimed it yet, because so much fun, no, for real. It's been so much funding going into
which
that.
one is that?
What, Karen, what was that hotel that you guys were managing? Milo, thank
Oh,
you,
I
Thank you.
Yeah.
thank you. So, yeah.
There was a great hotel for sale on Post Road,
Oh,
but
yeah,
here, and it would have been ideal, you know, but
that wasn't,
it
what,
was sold to a private, nobody wanted to. Didn't get into it, it would have been perfect, not near anybody. But on a bus line, and that's the other thing, you always gotta look at transportation.
transportation is really important.
And, you know, can they get food, and you know what I mean, like, That's all that has to be taken into consideration, so. But if everybody would work together, it could be done,
Mhm.
it could be done, you know?
What can we do better to make sure that system is in place and that we all are working together, including the group here that's
Yeah.
trying to figure it all out?
Yeah, exactly.
Think about that, and,
Yeah.
you know, try to help us with that. That
Yeah.
would be great. I mean, for me, I think about that all the time. If we all collect, build on collective power. You
Right.
think it's amazing what can be done. I've seen things
Absolutely.
change in the city where people came
So
together around a common cause. and
maybe we
things
should
changed.
all get together and have a brainstorming session and each bring some potential solutions, you know, and see what could be feasible, what, you know, is realistic and,
Are you a part of the coordinated interest system?
yes, yeah,
So a lot of people, you get a lot of calls for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're a member of the coalition.
And that's helpful, like,
Yeah, it's good to have a coordinated system, you know,
that way people are.
that way everybody has a fair chance and, you know, somebody's got to be the organization. As you said, we all don't work together much anyway, and without the coordinated entry, we'd all be off, probably all doing the same thing and, you know, not even knowing about it, so. Yeah,
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for your work. Thank you.
you're welcome, thank you.
Now, is there any more business before this
There isn't.
humble body? I'll entertain a motion. Councilman Grayson made a motion
Second.
and second by Councilman Espinal, all in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you again, and thank you for